Okay, let's unpack this. Life, it throws a lot at you, right? Challenges in your career, navigating relationships, maybe just trying to break bad habits or push past fear. It often feels less like smooth sailing and more like, well, a series of battles.
Definitely. And for this deep dive, we've gathered insights from a place that understands conflict intimately. Historical military strategy. Our source stack is built around principles found in works like the 33 Strategies of War.
Right. So our mission today is to look at these principles, many forged in really high-stakes life-or-death scenarios, and see how they might offer a powerful shortcut. A way to bypass some trial and error and apply this distilled wisdom to the battles you face every day.
It's fascinating because the word strategy itself gives us a clue. It comes from the ancient Greek strategos, leader of the army. And initially, warfare was seen as, well, raw force. Think Ares, the god of war. But over time, strategy evolved. It became linked more to Athena wisdom, strategic warfare. The idea shifted, didn't it, from just winning by brute force to winning through intelligence, foresight, cunning. Athena, always thinking several steps ahead.
So it's not really about being aggressive then. It's about being smart, subtle. And speaking of smart, the source makes a really important distinction. Strategy versus tactics.
Crucial distinction. Tactics are the immediate moves, the skirmish right in front of you, reacting to an obstacle. Strategy. That's the whole campaign, the long-term vision, seeing the whole chessboard.
And most of us, in life, we tend to get stuck in tactics, don't we?
Absolutely. So focused on winning the immediate argument or clearing the hurdle right now, that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the overall goal.
Exactly. You're bogged down in the trees, can't see the forest. The power of thinking strategically, as this source emphasizes, is learning to elevate yourself above that immediate fray. When you know your overall strategy, your daily tactical decisions become, well, simpler, more rational, because they serve a larger purpose.
Makes sense. So let's jump into how this wisdom applies, starting with maybe the most crucial battleground, yourself. Before you can effectively lead others or face external challenges, you've got to command your own mind, your emotions.
Yeah, and strategy one is pretty blunt about it. Life is endless battle. You can't fight effectively if you don't know who or what you're fighting. The insight here is the purpose that comes from identifying your enemies or obstacles. Learning to spot resistance may be internal, like self-doubt, or external pushback. Inwardly declaring war, as the source puts it, gives you direction, focus.
It's about defining the problem clearly, isn't it? You can't overcome something if you don't, well, look it square in the eye and name it. Recognizing those challenges, internal or external, it's not just being negative, it's that critical first step. It lets you plot your response, move forward with intent.
Okay, building on that self-mastery, strategy two is called the guerrilla war of the mind.
Hmm.
What's the biggest drag on many of us? The past. Old failures, regrets, habits.
Right. The source says you must wage conscious war against the past to fully engage with the present. Be ruthless with outdated methods, old thinking patterns. Keep your mind fluid, mobile, ready to adapt.
So the past only holds you back if you let it.
Exactly. This strategy pushes you to actively break free. It's not just passively letting go, it's an active campaign to ensure yesterday's failures don't dictate today's actions or, constrain your thinking when you face something new.
Right. Then when things get chaotic, a crisis at work, personal turmoil strategy three, the counterbalance, becomes vital. It's about maintaining presence of mind. The chaos throws your mind off balance.
And the strategic insight is that mental clarity isn't just there. It's something you cultivate. You toughen it, even by exposing yourself to adversity. You learn to detach just a bit from the immediate emotional storm.
Like the anecdotes about General Patton, deliberately going to the front lines.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't being reckless. The source suggests he was training himself. Overriding fear, building that presence of mind under pressure. It looked effortless, but it was conscious practice.
Or that story of the tea master facing a potential duel with a samurai. That's a great one. Instead of panicking, he just focused on the ritual of preparing tea, something familiar, deliberate.
That simple act forced his mind to concentrate. It calmed the inner turmoil, gave him composure. It's about finding that anchor point, maybe a simple action to recenter yourself when your imagination is running wild with fear.
Okay, strategy four introduces a powerful, almost uncomfortable concept.
Yeah.
Create a sense of urgency, the death ground strategy.
Yeah, this one's intense. The source argues your worst enemy is often yourself. Specifically, your tendency to waste time dreaming instead of acting. The strategic insight here is the paradoxical power of removing your own retreat options.
So putting yourself on death ground, metaphorically speaking. where turning back just isn't an option. It's not literal danger, obviously, but a psychological state. Back against the wall, time running out. You must act.
And that urgency, it cuts through procrastination. It focuses the mind with incredible intensity. Cortez burning his ships in Mexico is the classic example. His men literally couldn't go back.
Wow. Or the Chinese general positioning troops across a river.
Yeah.
No retreat possible.
Right. Knowing they'd fight fiercely for survival. The insight is that this enclosed feeling, this lack of options, can unlock a seriousness, a focus you wouldn't otherwise access.
And it applies outside the military, too. Think about Lyndon B. Johnson at 28. Jumping into that seemingly unwinnable congressional race, staking everything, he refused to wait 10 years for the safer path. He basically put himself on political death ground by committing fully when the odds were stacked against him.
This section also touches on leveraging the idea of an enemy. The insight being that opposition can provide an outlet for frustrations, sure, but also rally your own troops, your support base. It gives your cause definition.
Right, like the source's analysis of Margaret Thatcher, constantly defining herself against opponents like socialists.
Right.
By having that clear other, she solidified her own identity and, galvanized a loyal base.
Or Xenophon portraying the Persians as the barbaric other compared to the Greeks. That contrast heightened the stakes, fueled his troops' fighting spirit. It's presented in the source purely as a strategic technique using opposition to clarify your own position and consolidate support.
Okay, so that's commanding the self. Crucial first step. But what about leading others? Let's move into strategies for leading groups' organizational war. The core idea seems to be that even the most brilliant strategy is useless without an effective team to execute it. Structure and morale are key.
Absolutely. The strategic principle here is building speed and mobility into your group's structure. Avoiding confusion often means a single, clear authority, yeah, but the deeper insight is giving team members a sense of the overall objective and the latitude to use their initiative. They need to understand the spirit of the mission, not just follow rigid orders, so they can adapt.
That sounds like it leads right into Strategy 9, Command and Control. How do you lead without being, a dictator, so hands off, you lose control?
It's a balance, creating a clear chain of command where people follow your lead because you've put the right people in key positions, and given them enough freedom to act effectively, not just as automatons, clear, inspiring commands focusing on the team's goals.
And you have to watch out for groupthink. All right.
Definitely. The source highlights that as a major pitfall. Groups making irrational decisions just to conform rather than using critical analysis. Good command structures have to actively counter that tendency.
There's that example of what happens without clear, empowered command, Gallipoli, where General Stopford hesitated.
Yeah, the disastrous Gallipoli campaign. Stopford was so cautious he delayed advancing, even with an opportunity. Allowed the enemy to reinforce. Contrast that with George Marshall. He effectively cloned himself through carefully chosen protégés who understood his strategic vision. He led indirectly, but very effectively.
Or the German concept, Auftragstaktik.
Mission tactics?
Exactly, Auftragstaktik.
Yeah.
Officers were trained to understand the objective and given latitude to act, even deviate from orders, if the situation demanded it. There's that story of Molsky telling an officer his rank meant he knew when not to obey orders. That captures it perfectly, empowering intelligent initiative within a framework. Okay, structure and command are vital. But none of it matters without morale. Strategy 10, deterrence, ties in, but the broader morale strategies seem crucial. Napoleon's famous line.
The moral is to the physical as 3-to-1. Spirit is vastly more important than size or resources. The insight is you motivate people by getting them to think less about themselves and more about the collective. The group, the cause, the shared objective, give them a common enemy or challenge to rally against. Tie their survival to the group's success.
And leaders have to lead from the front, don't they? Share the dangers, make sacrifices.
Absolutely. So people want to emulate you, please you, not just follow orders because they have to. Morale is contagious. Starts at the top.
Like Vince Lombardi with the Packers, taking them from losers to champions. Part of that was changing their whole attitude, right?
His genius was partly that, yeah. Changing their belief in what was possible through sheer confidence and focused intensity.
Napoleon, too. A master of man management, the source calls him. Uniting troops behind big causes of the revolution, France's glory. Leading them into battle. Appealing to pride, playing on emotions.
And Caesar. Facing that mutiny before a battle, troops paralyzed by fear, he didn't plead, he shamed them, threatened to fight with only one loyal legion, appealed to their pride, spurred them into begging to join the fight. These stories really show the power of leadership that taps into shared purpose and emotion.
Okay, so we've covered commanding yourself, leading groups. Now, how about situations where you're, well, on the defensive? The source says this isn't passive, right? It's about leveraging weakness and using time strategically.
Exactly. Strategy 11 is trade space for time, the non-engagement strategy. The strategic insight here is that retreat isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strength. When facing a stronger opponent or situation, stepping back buys you precious time. Time to recover, gain perspective, rethink. Sometimes the best defense is just doing nothing, letting the opponent overextend or lose momentum.
Like Robert Bruce against Edward II in Scotland.
Classic example. Instead of meeting the larger English army head-on, he retreated into the forests, used mobile raids, made the campaign costly, exhausting for Edward, wore him down.
Or Mao Zedong in his early struggles.
Yeah.
Retreating.
Yes. He retreated into the countryside, used guerrilla tactics. That wasn't defeat in his mind. It was buying time. Time to consolidate, rethink strategy, build support, while the bigger enemy exhausted itself.
There's also this idea of economy of means in defense, using minimal resources for maximum impact.
Right. The insight is attack the opponent's weaknesses with your strengths. Don't just crash against their strongest point.
Like Queen Elizabeth I against the Spanish Armada.
Yeah.
She didn't try to match their big ships directly.
No, she couldn't. Instead, she used smaller, more agile ships. And crucially, focused efforts on attacking Spain's supply lines and finances, made the war economically unsustainable for them, preserved England's limited resources. Smart defense.
Then there's Strategy 12, the counterattack. This is where defense flips into offense.
Yeah, the insight here is let the enemy make the first move, maybe overextend, then use their own aggression against them. Clausewitz called that rapid shift from defense to attack the most brilliant moment. It's about controlling their minds, baiting them into a mistake.
Like Scipio drawing Hannibal out of Italy by attacking Carthage itself.
Exactly. Hannibal had to leave Italy to defend his homeland. He fell right into Scipio's trap. Brilliant countermove.
What about Jackie Robinson? Dealing with Sal Magli's aggressive pitching.
That's an interesting one. Magli tried to intimidate him, shaving him with pitches. Robinson's strategic poise, refusing to react emotionally, refusing to back down, meant Magli's tactics didn't work psychologically. You could argue Robinson's composure was the counterattack. It might have even disrupted Magli's own focus eventually.
And Strategy 10, create a threatening presence deterrence. That also fits defense, right? Avoiding the fight altogether.
The best defense. The insight is building a reputation or cultivating a presence that makes fighting you seem, well, not worth the cost. Sometimes uncertainty about the consequences is more powerful than an overt threat.
Like that old samurai master.
Yeah.
Who achieved deterrence just by walking around looking bored.
Wonderful example, isn't it? His reputation, plus that passive presence like a stable rock people feared disturbing, Iwa no Mi they called it, people were just too uneasy to challenge him. His perceived danger, combined with his lack of overt threat, was the perfect defense.
And John Boyd in the Pentagon, using his difficult personality.
In a way, yes. He was intentionally abrasive, eccentric. Generals avoided him. That created a vacuum. It allowed him to push through his controversial jet fighter designs because people preferred not to engage with him directly. His perceived difficulty became a strategic shield.
All right, enough defending. Let's talk about taking the initiative, offensive strategies. These seem to require planning, speed, and really controlling the dynamic.
Definitely. Strategy 14, overwhelm with speed, the blitzkrieg strategy. The insight is simple but powerful. In a world often paralyzed by indecision, speed is power. Striking fast, before opponents can fully react or even think clearly, makes them emotional, unbalanced, prone to mistakes.
Like Napoleon's early campaigns, Italy, or moving against Prussia.
Absolutely. He moved so quickly, he caught his enemies still arguing about what to do, sowed panic and disorganization before they could even form a coherent defense. Lightning speed.
Okay, then strategy 15, control the dynamic forcing strategies. This isn't just about dominating.
No, the insight is deeper. It's about defining the nature of the relationship or the confrontation itself. You control opponents' minds by pushing their emotional buttons or maneuvering them into situations where they basically have no good choice but to do what you need them to.
Like Mayo asked with the Paramount executives.
Yeah.
Shifting the battleground.
Great example. Instead of fighting head-on over every detail, she strategically moved the fight to writing and directing areas the execs were totally unfamiliar with, especially dealing with her. By forcing the fight onto her turf, she compelled them to give her creative control. They just couldn't handle the dynamic she created.
Or Sherman against Johnston in Georgia. Not attacking directly.
Right. Sherman didn't launch costly frontal assaults. He constantly maneuvered around Johnston, threatened his supply lines, escape routes. That controlled the dynamic by forcing Johnston into repeated retreats towards Atlanta, exactly where Sherman wanted him.
Strategy 20 sounds related. Maneuver them into weakness ripening for the sickle. Avoid the direct fight by getting them into a bad spot before the fight even starts.
Precisely. The insight is, avoid costly battles by maneuvering opponents into strategically weak positions beforehand. Create dilemmas where all their options are bad, making them, as the name suggests, ripe for defeat with minimal effort.
Like Napoleon and Ulm, positioning his forces in that complex way.
That's a classic example. His corps were positioned along the Rhine in what looked complex, maybe chaotic, but it was deliberate, creating sheer overwhelming strategic advantage. The Austrian general Mack had no good moves. Every way he turned, Napoleon had superior forces waiting, led to surrender without a major battle.
And the swordsman Sugahara Bokuden, getting the arrogant samurai off the boat.
A different kind of maneuver, but same principle. Avoided the fight by suggesting they duel on an island. Samurai jumps ashore full of bluster. Bokuden just rows away. Won easily by maneuvering the opponent into a foolish position without even drawing his sword. Clever.
Okay, strategy 21. Negotiate while advancing. The diplomatic war strategy. Use forward momentum to create pressure during talks.
Yeah, the insight is that continuing to advance or build leverage while negotiating creates pressure. The more ground you appear to take, the more you seem to have to give away in meaningless concessions later, while keeping your core demands. It helps to build a reputation for being tough, unwilling to compromise easily.
Like Pyrrhus marching on Rome while offering peace talks.
Exactly. His advance created urgency, pressure, made Rome consider his terms because the alternative looked like immediate conflict at their gates.
And Charles de Gaulle, during WWII negotiations.
Another prime example cited by the source. He presented himself as the indispensable savior of France. Refused compromise, walked out sometimes, maintained an uncompromising front. He used that stance to gain leverage because Churchill and Roosevelt felt they needed him more than he needed them. Controlled the narrative.
Strategy 19. Envelop the enemy annihilation. Sounds intense.
It is. The principle is relentless pressure from all sides. Offer no escape. The insight. Cut off an opponent's options completely. Create overwhelming pressure that crushes their will to resist.
Like John D. Rockefeller in the oil industry. Not military, but strategic envelopment.
Perfect example. He enveloped independent producers by gaining control of critical infrastructure, the railroads, the pipelines. Without a way to get their oil to market, the producers were trapped, eventually forced to sell to him. Total envelopment.
And the idea of attacking the flank. Not head-on.
Always a core principle. Rarely attack where an opponent is strongest. Go for their vulnerable side. In life, the flank is often psychological, isn't it? A deeply held belief, a blind spot, an area they aren't guarding because they're focused on their visible front. Attacking the flank unbalances them.
Like Napoleon near Verona, threatening supply lines instead of a direct assault.
Yes, he divided his army, hit their strategic flank, forced them to pull back, lose the initiative.
Or Julius Caesar, politically, winning over his rivals' potential allies.
A brilliant application. Instead of attacking rivals directly, he'd identify groups they were neglecting. Then he'd champion their causes. Seemingly taking their side, he was occupying his opponent's political and psychological flank, not fighting their front, but winning over their support base, leaving them isolated, unbalanced.
And underlying all of this, offense and defense, is strategy 17. Know your enemy, the intelligence strategy.
Absolutely fundamental. The ultimate target isn't just physical resources, it's the opponent's mind. The insight is the critical importance of training yourself to read people, picking up unconscious signals, understanding motivations, trying not to just project your own thoughts onto them.
Great leaders like Hannibal, Caesar, Metternich, they were students of human nature.
Deep students. Musashi, the samurai, talked about having eyes that see through things, perceiving inner realities, not just surfaces.
And Prince Metternich with Tsar Alexander the Zerth. That's a fascinating case study.
Compelling. Metternich didn't argue logically with the Tsar. He studied Alexander's personality, deeply emotional, volatile. He learned Alexander needed everything to feel like a grand crusade. So Metternich framed his own goals, Metternich's goals, as a noble crusade against revolution. He effectively manipulated Alexander by playing directly on his psychological needs and desires. Masterful reading of his opponent.
Okay, now let's shift gears slightly. Let's dive into what the source calls unconventional dirty warfare. And it's important we state clearly, right, that the source presents these as techniques used in warfare and political conflict, We're just relaying the analysis.
Exactly. The focus is on deception, leveraging perception. Strategy 23 is weave a seamless blend of fact and fiction misperception strategies. The core insight. Control perception, control the person. Make it incredibly difficult for enemies to know what's real. Feed their expectations, manufacture a reality they want to believe.
Like Themistocles before the Battle of Salamis, sending that false message to Xerxes.
Perfect historical example. He knew Xerxes wanted to hear the Greeks were falling apart, planning retreat. So Themistocles fed him that lie through a trusted slave, lured the huge Persian fleet into the narrow channel, trapped and destroyed. Masterful misperception.
On a much bigger scale, the Allied deception before D-Day, Operation Fortitude.
Massive deception. Created an entirely fictional army, inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, commanded by Patton, whom the Germans feared. They placed this phantom army opposite the Pas-de-Calais, convinced the Germans the invasion would happen there, drew crucial troops away from the real landing site in Normandy.
And this principle, misdirection, decoy attacks, it applies in everyday life too, doesn't it?
Sure. You might make gestures towards one less important goal to distract attention from your real objective. People often assume the visible action is the true intention, controlling perception.
Strategy 24. Take the line of least expectation. The ordinary, extraordinary strategy. So the insight is the power of surprise through breaking patterns.
Exactly. Do something totally conventional, lull them into a pattern, then hit with something completely unexpected. Or sometimes the truly unexpected thing is to do something utterly ordinary when they expect something dramatic.
Like Hannibal against the Romans. His army seemed alien, but his tactics varied.
Yes. He'd use bizarre, unpredictable tactics at battles like Trebia and Cannae. But sometimes he'd line up conventionally. That unpredictable oscillation kept the Romans completely off balance. They just never knew what to expect from him.
Or Muhammad Ali's phantom punch against Sonny Liston.
Another good example, maybe not a knockout blow itself, but it came from an unexpected angle at an unexpected moment. Caught Liston totally off guard because Liston was braced for a different kind of fight entirely. Surprise.
Wendigo and Ojibwa warriors.
Yeah.
Using strange dances before attacking.
Right. They'd appear before attacking the Sioux, performing bizarre dances in strange costumes. That wasn't just ritual. The source presents it as strategic. It terrified the Sioux, upset their expectations, created chaos before the actual sudden military attack, using the extraordinary to gain advantage.
Okay, strategy 26 is fight the enemy's cause, moral warfare. The source analyzes this as framing your own cause as righteous, often by painting the enemy as authoritarian or hypocritical.
Yes, exactly. It discusses using media, strong language, to shape narratives, baiting enemies into overreacting, which then highlights your own perceived goodness in contrast, aiming the charge of being power-hungry at them.
Like Martin Luther during the Reformation. Using the printing press.
Masterful example cited in the source. He used the new printing press and powerful moral arguments against the church selling indulgences, framed his challenge as righteous against corruption, used accessible language, appealed to the masses, provoked the church into a heavy-handed response that just bolstered his popular support.
The source also analyzes groups like the Algerians and North Vietnamese, framing their conflicts as wars of liberation.
Yes, it analyzes how they strategically used that framing, liberation versus imperialism, disseminated internationally. This helped gain global sympathy and undermine support for the wars within France and the U.S. Again, this is presented in the source purely as an analysis of a strategic technique used in political conflict, not an endorsement of any cause.
Got it. Strategy 30. So uncertainty and panic. The chain reaction strategy. The source talks about sporadic acts, often psychological, creating a feeling of threat and provoking overreaction.
Right. The goal isn't necessarily direct victory, but creating chaos, destabilization. The source analyzes how terrorist groups leverage their seeming smallness. They tailor actions for mass media to create the illusion they're everywhere, appear more powerful than they are. It's a war of nerve.
Like the Ismaili assassins historically,
Yeah.
using targeted terror.
Yes, they used targeted terror to destabilize larger empires like the Seljuks, created pervasive fear that no one was safe, even within fortified castles. And the source analyzes modern terrorism similarly as a strategy often rooted in desperation, leveraging smallness to create uncertainty, provoking often irrational, heavy-handed responses from authorities. It discusses events like 9/11 as chain reaction events, designed to unbalance a regime far beyond the physical targets. So when facing challenges that try to create panic or uncertainty in your own life, the strategic response, as the source suggests, is to maintain rationality. Stay calm amidst the emotional storm. It's your last line of defense against being controlled by fear.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the big picture. Grand strategy, and crucially, endings. Strategy at the highest level, it's about the whole campaign, right? Plotting steps far ahead.
Exactly. As historians like Thucydides and leaders like Napoleon understood, individual battles only matter as they set up the next ones. On the path to the overall objective, you have to subordinate everything to that long-term goal. Keep your eye on the prize.
Alfred Hitchcock is a fascinating example of this campaign mindset outside war.
Isn't he? He meticulously planned every single detail of his films, like a military campaign. Controlled everything. Camera angles, editing, even using tricks like cameras without film, or subtly manipulating actors' emotions. Every element served the overall strategic goal, creating a specific emotional impact on the audience. He wasn't just filming scenes, he orchestrated a total experience.
And strategy 22 is incredibly important. Know how to end things, the exit strategy. How you finish really matters, doesn't it? You're judged by it.
Immensely. A messy ending can haunt you or a project for years. The art is knowing when to stop, knowing when the victory is sufficient or when to pull back from a situation that just has no realistic, positive exit.
The source mentions the end of Desert Storm as an example of not having a clear exit plan.
Yes, an illustration of what can happen. The war technically ended, but without addressing the underlying issues, which led to continued instability. It underscores the need to plan your exit from any major project, relationship, conflict before you get too deeply entrenched. Think about the ending from the beginning.
And the power of the ending. It's huge because, really, nothing truly ends, does it?
In a way, no. How you conclude something profoundly shapes what comes next. It sets the stage for the future. Some victories can feel like defeats in the long run. Some defeats can contain the seeds of future success. You need a fluid outlook.
Especially in social interactions. Knowing the culminating point.
Yeah, that's strategic too. A conversation that drags on past its natural peak leaves a negative feeling, doesn't it? The artist ending things, maybe just a moment before others expect it. Leave them with a positive afterglow, wanting more.
Like Lyndon B. Johnson with voters. Knowing how to end the conversation.
Master of this, apparently. He intuitively knew how to end those interactions to leave a lasting positive impression, stir emotions that translated into votes. The end of that conversation was really just the transition to the next stage of influence for him.
So stepping back and looking at this whole stack of insights, from military strategy, from sources like the 33 Strategies of War, it really does offer a powerful lens, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a kind of shortcut, maybe, to understanding dynamics that play out all around us and within us, whether we consciously recognize them or not.
And it's about applying these principles wisely, ethically. Like Athena, right? Focusing on intelligence, achieving goals effectively, not just brute force like Ares. We've covered commanding yourself, leading teams, defense, offense, handling unpredictability, and that critical art of ending things well.
Yeah, it's not about becoming ruthless or needlessly aggressive. It's about strategic awareness, having tools to navigate complexity with, hopefully, greater clarity.
And that final provocative thought from this material, that true victory and defeat are often just temporary states. Points on a longer continuum.
Right. The real skill, what truly matters, is the transition, what you learn from the experience, how you position yourself for what comes next, and the energy or feeling you carry forward and leave behind. That's crucial.
The only real ending, the source reminds us, is, well, death. Everything else is a transition.
The real battle is the ongoing, endless one of navigating life itself.
So thinking about the challenges you are currently facing, which of these strategies feels most relevant right now? How might viewing that situation through this kind of strategic lens, borrowed from the battlefield, maybe change your approach? Something to think about.